Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Was a Scientist. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is that chicken dude. Please go support them. Now let us dive in. Whoa! This place is huge, Kirishima exclaimed while looking at the huge building before them. Before him, alongside the entirety of classes 1A and B, was the newly constructed marvel that was the Neo-Icon Phoenix Research Facility. Tall white walls made of stone, windows so large they became a wall, decorative plants, two above-ground streams that had an interconnection with one another, two large man-made ponds that houses a plethora of koi fish that shimmered as they swam in the light, and a sign on the overhead archway that lead into the front of the building with massive doorways. On the sign was the facility's name alongside its mascot, a dodo bird. Apart from the two classes and their respective homeroom teachers, chaperoning them was present Mike and the principal of UA himself, Nizu. It looks like a collage, Jiro pointed out. Most laboratories double as universities, Ida informed her. Looks kinda plain, Siro stated unimpressed. That's the point, Mina side-checked him. As they all admired the building, the heckler of 1B, Momona, came up to the class and began to jeer them as he usually does at any chance he gets. Ah! Of course, you low-grade 1A welts can't understand the majesty and simplicity of such a structure. If you need a dictionary to expand your minuscule minds, I'll be happy to. He began to vex them until their class president came up behind them and karate-chopped them on the back of the neck, causing him to black out. Shut up, Momona, Kendo scolded him while slinging him over her shoulder and walking away with him as she said, we're no better. Pony just started crying and asking if this place was Auschwitz. Whatever that is. Momona tried to squeak out something but couldn't through his half-conscious state. As 1A watched this unfold, Uraraka, who just got off the bus, said something that caught all their interest. I know this place. My parents' construction business built it, she stated nonchalantly. Before anyone could inquire further, Principal Nizu grabbed their attention. All right, settle down, he called out, making everyone go quiet as he said, now I want all of you to be respectful and well-behaved. Professor Cristallo has been gracious enough to allow access to his building for your hero training. So you are to listen to him and his staff as if they were a teacher or UA. Yes sir, all the students said in unison. Principal Nizu, Momo called while raising her hand. Why were we all made to sign a waiver before coming here and wearing these wristbands? She asked while pointing to the metallic devices on each of their hands. Professor Cristallo does a lot of top-secret work that the public is not supposed to know about. So what you see here today, you are not allowed to speak a word of it until it has been revealed to the public. As for the wristbands, they act as tractors in case any of you get lost while wandering the building, Nizu explained. That's also why we confiscated your phones for the time being, Blood Vlad told them as he and Eraserhead held small bags filled with the teens' phones. Mina blew a raspberry and with a wave of her hand stated nonchalantly, oh come on Sensei. Don't you think you might be overreacting a little bit? We're not children. All the adults stared at the pink girl with half-lidded expressions of exasperation. All apart from Nizu, who was smiling with hands together as he told her, Ms. Ishido, the day you got into UA you made over 37 posts about the school with varying pictures, in one day. It was 38, she argued back in a pout. My point still stands, Nizu declared. I get that whatever they do here is top secret, but what could they possibly be doing? It's not like the public is smart enough to understand half of the fancy science stuff that goes on here, Tokoyami interjected with logic. How about I just show you, a voice called out as all heads turned to the front of the building where they saw Egon riding on the tusks of Gammoth as she teared up and trumpeted loudly. Welcome students of UA to the Neo-Icon Phoenix Research Facility. Egon welcomed the students as the mammoth carefully walked down the steps and lowered the man. Nipe? Nip? You called this place NIP, Kaminari stated aloud. Egon looks at the teen with an expression mixed with disbelief and flabbergasted as he replies bluntly, I stroll in on an extinct animal and that's what you take away from this? Holy shit, is that a woolly mammoth? Shouted someone from the large crowd. Egon snapped his fingers and exclaimed, that's the reaction I was looking for. And yes, she is. Now I understand the waiver, Momo says to her friends as they nod without taking their eyes off the mammoth. Egon pets the huge animal's trunk as he rumbles with happiness and says, this here is Gammoth, one of our first experiments, and no, I will not tell you how we did it. I don't know if I feel comfortable being in a place like this. Seeing as they have no respect for life and trying to play God. Especially for creating that, Ibra states aloud with displeasure. Well, it was bound to happen eventually, little missy. We're just the first to do so. And if you don't want to be here you don't have to be. No one is forcing you, Egon offers. Ibra looks ready to accept that offer until Momona seemingly manages to sway her decision, making her stay. Watching the teen stare at Gammoth in silence for a long uncomfortable amount of time, he exclaimed, well, don't just stand there gawking with mouths agape in awe. Get in here. You, little heroes, have a nasty villain plan to stop. But many clues were left at many scenes of crimes. So you better find them and figure out what they're up to before it's too late. Momona, on point as usual, goes to the front, stands before Egon, and loudly and proudly proclaims while laughing, no need to fret, Professor Egon, for the glory of Class 1B will outshine and show up 1A. And then you and your lab will see without a doubt how much better we are at overachieving in any task given. Egon blinks at the boy with proud sparkles around him, not noticing Kendo marching her way up to chop him down again. Only for the man to state coldly, wow. I've never cared about anything less in my entire life. Momona appeared to freeze up and shatter on the spot while Kendo halts in her tracks. Everyone stares in shock at his response as Egon's smile shifts into an unamused expression, to which Momona falls to pieces right in front of him. One person from the crowd whistled and then said in a low tone, savage. Kendo picks up the broken boy and Egon motions for all of them to come inside. The teens do so, unnervingly quiet, as Gammoth moves away from the steps to drink from the shimmering fish ponds. As all the teens move past the professor with hurried steps, Nizu walks up to him and strikes up a conversation. My, when you called me back that day and told me you do some unusual things here, I didn't think you meant this, he told him with an impressed tone while looking over the extinct animal. Is it wise to be showing this to teenagers? Aizawa asks in a monotone yet serious tone. Hey, if I'm gonna make an impression, it might as well be a splash. And besides, the public gonna come to learn of what we do soon, Egon argues back with a nonchalant shrug. Though if you think the mammoth is a surprise, just wait till you meet the chicken and the octopus, he says vaguely with a wink of his eye, making the three men and animal all look at one another in confusion. As the teachers were looking at one another and the students were walking by, Egon caught sight of Bakugu, and once his back was turned, glared at him with every ounce of fury in his blood before returning to his natural expression. However, this glare didn't go unnoticed, and Kirishima almost froze up in fear at the sight of this but pushed through walking normally. Once out of earshot, he ran up to Bakugu to tell him what he saw. Whoa! Bakubro, did you see that? He asked in a panicked tone. See what, shitty hair? Bakugu asked back in an irritated voice. That professor dude. He just glared at you so hard and cold I swear you would have been frozen solid or fire would shoot from his eyes, he explained while looking pale as his body shook from fear. If looks could kill, Kaminari added, who also saw the glare, and shivered violently before stating, you would have been, everywhere. Bakugu just raised his eyebrow and looked back at the professor, only to see him casually conversing with the other adults. Bakugu didn't notice anything at all but he would keep his guard up around him. Just to be safe. From there the teens were led inside to a massive building that looked like something straight out of the movies. Long hallways with automatic doors revealed rooms with bubbling chemicals, blinking lights, sparking machines, groves of plants, animal subjects, and so much more. The main entrance was the most interesting due to its size and the large fish tank that held several dozen specimens, including some smaller sharks. It was truly a sight to behold. After gawking at the amazingness, the front desk that was being operated by Millicent welcomed them warmly and then gave them instructions on what to do. Giving each group of 4 a scrap of evidence, they were to go around, find more evidence, and then piece it together to find out one of the 5 villains' dastardly plans. The teens took their evidence and scattered it like bugs to find more clues. All of them ran from room to room and checked everywhere they could, but mostly got distracted by everything they saw. They were able to talk to all of the staff to find out more or be given a hint. Then they got even more distracted when one group found Pete and began to chase him until a wild herd of teens chasing a single dodo to get a look at it. While this was happening, Nizu, Present Mike, Eraserhead, Blood Vlad, and Egon all went to the employee break room to chat and relax. It was quite a shocker for the adults when a chicken with a large brain and a walking octopus strolled in and began to talk. Nizu was a little gripped about Egon making them, but he was assured their newfound intelligence was accidental. From there the three animals began to talk with one another until Nizu's sadistic human hate boner started to rear its head and scared off the only other talking animals in the world. Only for Egon to get a text from them saying they don't want to interact with Nizu unless necessary. Which the professor told the principal, much to his dismay. Meanwhile, Izuku has hidden away in his office behind the door that was locked from the outside. All signs that this was an office were taken down from the outside and warning signs were put in its place. The teen tried his best to keep busy with paperwork, but they went far quicker than expected, and when he finished, they were already there. So he just sat bored in his office and took down notes on future projects and theories, but that too got very old. So he decided to call someone for an update on something. Picking up his phone and dialing the number, he was greeted by the sound of cluttering and jumbled energy as the line on the other end was thrown about. Soon after he was given multiple hellos of trying to keep it together. Rolling his eyes, Izuku said, "Professor Genus, how's Torchwick doing?" Collecting himself, the professor looked into the window of the enclosure and answered, "Oh, he's doing just fine. He's acclimating to his new padlock quite well and is eating well too. No stress or anything." But, Izuku repeated. Holding back a bit, the professor finally admitted, "We may have to build something bigger very shortly." Izuku felt surprised by this and inquired, "That padlock should be more than big enough for him." Genus looked into the enclosure once more and saw the dragon munching on his meal. He answered back, "Sure, but he's only 2 weeks old and already he's the size of a pony. We're feeding him geese, but soon that'll go to pigs and then cows." As he said this, the little dragon polished off his meal with a large burp. Izuku sighs while rubbing his face and tells him before hanging up, "Let's collaborate on that later. Igata go kropka." Turning away from the phone, he turned on the security feed of the building and watched as all the young heroes ran around and worked together, or at least tried to. It put a smile on his face to know that even though he wasn't a hero, he could still help them. Then the feed switched over to a familiar face and a wellspring of emotions burst out. Quickly turning the computer off, he spun around in his chair and placed his hands over his face. Breathing deeply several times, he attempted to calm himself down. After a bit, he finally got to the point where he could speak and talk to himself. "Calm down, Izuku. Calm down. It's just for 1 day. He doesn't even know you're here. It'll be fine. The door is locked and no one is allowed in. Nothing will happen," he tried to assure himself, but failed. Then he nearly jumped out of his skin when he heard the sound of someone trying to enter. He stayed quiet and waited for them to leave. From his end, he could hear what was happening on the other side. "Hey! This door is locked," Mina stated as she tried to get the automatic door to open. Bakugo pushed past her, attempted to open it, failed, and began to bang on it while yelling, "Hey! Open up!" On top of the door, a PA speaker blared to life and the voice of Hatsum called to them, "Sorry kid, no can do." "Why the fuck not?" Bakugo shouted at the box while everyone else was looking around trying to find the voice. "There's a lot of dangerous chemicals in there. Highly explosive chemicals," Hatsum explained. "And," Bakugo argued. "Already tired of this," he sighs and affirms, "do I have to spell it out for you? Look, it's off limits to everyone, okay? Several rooms are in fact off limits to several of you with problematic quirks." "Problematic?" Bakugo shouted back, looking ready to find a speaker. Rolling his eyes to the other end, Hatsum tells them in no uncertain terms, "We didn't leave any clues in these rooms, so go look elsewhere." When he heard them leave, Izuku let out a breath he had been holding in. After relaxing in his chair, his stomach complained loudly. After rubbing it, he sighed and looked at the time. It was only a little past noon. "Man, I'm so hungry. And the cafeteria is serving katsudon," Izuku complained aloud while spinning around in his chair. He thought about what to do and then realized the simplest solution. He took out his phone and sent out a text. "Izuku, hey Egon. I'm super hungry. Can you grab me something?" "Egon, love to, but I'm kinda busy. Let me text the others and see what they're up to. Gimme a minute." Egon, "Okay, everyone is busy and can't be pulled away from what they're doing." Izuku, "What about the robots?" Egon, "Apparently they've all been shut down by proxy of needing a software update." Izuku, "Shoot." Egon, "Let me check something." Egon, "Okay, so Bakubrat is on the other end of the facility. You could probably sneak to the cafeteria, grab your food, and head right back." Izuku, "Okay." Izuku sighs as he gets up from his chair, walks to the door, places his hand for it to read, and when it opens he peeks out his head before saying when all was clear, "Here goes nothing." Meanwhile, with Team Bakugo, the group consisting of the explosive boy, a pink queen, a red adorable strong boy, and an ADHD Piku were all sitting on the floor and trying to make sense of the clues they managed to put together. However, after a very long while of mixing and matching, they couldn't connect even two of the dots, much to the group's annoyance. Ugh! I can't understand this. It makes no sense. I thought finding clues to a villain's plan would be easy, Mina complained aloud while slamming her hands on the floor. Kirishima sighs and tells her, it rarely is. This ain't a comic strip. Maybe we're not looking at it correctly. It's clues, not a set of instructions, Kaminari offered while shuffling them around before arranging them into some kind of picture. As the three of them discuss and brainstorm, Bakugo, who was standing off to the side, looked over at their complained evidence before saying, "Wait a second." The other three teens stop and look at his sudden inclusion. Kirishima asks him, "What? Do you see something?" Bakugo goes over, takes the clues, and arranges them for a bit, then after he finishes his eyes widened as he yells, "It's fake." "It is?" Kaminari inquired. "A red herring. They're sending us off in the wrong direction on purpose." "It's going to," Bakugo begins to tell them before suddenly turning tail and blasting off down the hallway, leading to the evidence being blown off all over. "Bakugo, wait," Mina yells for him as her voice is snuffed out by his explosions. This leads the other two to wonder what had gotten into him, what he found out, and try to reclaim their clues. Meanwhile, in the employee lounge, Egon was pouring himself another cup of coffee when his phone rang. Picking it up he answered, "Yes? Sir, we have an issue. That Bakugo child is suddenly making a mad dash and heading for the cafeteria," Millicent tells him from the other end. Egon dewed out his coffee and yells, "What? I'll call Izuku now," leading the other adults to look at him strangely. Meanwhile, Izuku stands in the cafeteria with a piping hot bowl of his favorite dish in hand. Taking a moment to admire the smell, he holds the food over his nose and breathes deeply. "Ah, sweet sweet katsudon. Come to me," he says dreamily while breathing out. Taking a pair of chopsticks he says, "Just one bite before I go." Just before he could bring the tender pork to his mouth his phone rings and breaks him out of his trance. He signs and picks up the phone while answering, "Hey Professor." "Izuku. Where are you?" Egon says in a hurried voice. A bit confused by his tone, Izuku replied, "In the cafeteria." "Get out of there now," Egon yells at him. Freaked out now, Izuku freezes up from his raised tone and questions back in fear, "What? Why?" However, his question is soon answered when Bakugo comes barreling through the cafeteria doors while saying to himself, "I can cut through here and dash da." Bakugo freezes up at seeing Izuku, and so does the boy. The two of them stood there and stared at one another for a long while in heavy silence. Neither making a move nor speaking, both were unsure if what they saw was real. "Izuku? Izuku," Egon begins to call him, hearing no reply until he finally figured it out and asked, "He's there right now, isn't he?" The only thing Izuku could do was make a yes sound through the phone. "Deku," Bakugo stated in an unusually calm and confused tone. "Keikaken," Izuku says back, not knowing what to say or do. Then the blind bit hands tighten into fists as his face grows red, a tack mark bulges on his head, and his face twists into a scowl. Then with a primal roar, he shouts, "Deku." Without hesitation or any thought, Izuku takes the bowl of katsudon and chucks it right at him, landing a direct hit. Only to watch as the bowl of food falls off his face and leaves behind its contents, thus leading to an even angrier Bakugo to be left stewing where he stood. Izuku gulped and whispers, "Oh." All before Bakugo roars like an animal and Izuku takes off with him in hot pursuit. Normally Bakugo could easily catch up to him, but two factors were at play slowing him down enough for Izuku to keep ahead. First, they were in an ensouled space making it hard to control the direction of his explosions without the force of it kicking him back into a wall. And second, Izuku knew this place, it was his place, so he knew what place looked like a continuation and what was a dead end, and what spots had a turn you couldn't see right away. As Izuku ran for his life he heard Egon calling out to him. "Izuku! What's going on?" Egon practically yelled hearing the explosions. "He's after me," Izuku yelled back, already out of breath. "What? Get to your office," Egon commands him, and he heard before the line goes dead, "Deku, stop running." As the heroes were wondering what had gotten into Egon all of a sudden, he turned on his heels and made a mad dash for the door. Though in the process he ended up barreling straight through Bloodvlad, causing him to fall and break one of the break room tables, and accidentally stepping on top of Nizu as he raced out the door and into the hallways. As he barreled through groups of young heroes, he quickly typed in his phone and put it up to his ear. A few rings later and Cho answered, "Yes sir?" "Cho. I need you to activate the defense system. That Bakugu brat is after Izuku," Egon exclaimed to her. A brief silence and Cho replied, "Shit." "What?" Egon questions. "I'm running a system diagnostic on the whole facility. I can do anything on my end," Cho told him. "Shit," Egon cursed while pocketing the phone and running as hard as he could. He knew he couldn't fight someone with previous practice and now hero training with their quirk, but he would damn well try no matter what the outcome. Hell drop kick this kid then get blown to hell. He just had to make it to him before he got to Izuku. Then he got a call. Picking it up he heard ragged breathing before the sound of Izuku's voice. "I huff made it," Izuku painted out. Breathlessly. "Good. Now just stay there until we can dash. Egon tried to tell him with some relief until he heard an explosion. "Open this fucking door, you shitty nerd. You got some explaining to do," he heard Bakugu yell loud enough for the phone to pick up. "Leave me alone," Izuku yelled through his office. There was a long silence for a while until Bakugu exploded, "Don't tell me what to do, you quirkless bastard." With that 1, 2, and 3 explosions hit the door, causing it to shake and bend inwards. Izuku almost froze up in terror but managed to say over the phone, "He's attacking the door. He's gonna break it down." "What?" "He wouldn't," Egon stated before hearing another explosion that nearly caved it in. "I take it back." "Of course, he would," Egon exclaimed. "What do I do?" Izuku asked him in a hurried and frightened voice. Egon thought fast then told him, "Go out the back door and run to padlock number 5. "What?" "But that's where Torchwick is," Izuku told him as another explosion hit the door. "I'm very aware of that," Egon told him as he barreled through a group of 1B students. "I don't like Kaken, but I don't want to kill him," Izuku exclaimed as he stood by the back door, ready to push the button. "Torchwick is too small to kill a person, for now, plus his fire isn't anything that bad. It's just enough to set him off," Egon tried to assure him. "What do you mean?" Izuku questions as the door begins to gain single marks. "That guy is covered in a nitroglycerin compound, right? And Torchwick can only ignite things," Egon explains. "But Izuku tried to argue. "And he's resistant to his explosions, right?" Egon asks rhetorically. Izuku think for a moment then realized what he was saying and exclaimed, "You want to blow him up with his quirk?" Egon groaned and tells him, "Just till he's unconscious or he gives up in the presence of a dragon. Plus Torchwick listens to you like a dog, so there'll be no death." Izuku watches as the door is only one more blast from caving in, so he gulps, presses the door button, and says, "Okay." Izuku escaped as he pressed the lockdown button on the other end and ran for the padlocks. As he heard the door locks bolt down tight, he heard his front door finally give in and fly into his office. Bakugu stormed into the now empty office and screamed, "Deku uu." Meanwhile, Egon hung up the phone and put it into his pocket as he continued to run through the facility, this time heading to the padlocks. On his mad dash, he nearly crashed into Dr. Genus. As he ran, the doctor said, "Ah, Professor Egon. Can I dash?" But he rushed past him as he exclaimed, "Not now, Anima. I have to get to the Torchwick's enclosure in padlock 5. Genus raised an eyebrow as he ran past and yelled to him, "Padlock 5? Torchwick isn't in padlock 5 anymore." Egon stopped in his tracks and with his face red and breathless he asked back, "Wait, what?" Genus nods and explains, "Yeah, we moved him earlier today to padlock 3 since we underestimated how big he was gonna get." Egon grabs him and half yelled, "If he's in padlock 3 then what's in 5? Meanwhile, Izuku had finally made his way to padlock 5 and was leaning on the control panel as he attempted to catch his breath. In many ways he didn't like his more sedentary lifestyle, since he went from a string bean to the pole it climbed up on. He was even more of a wimp than he was before, and even he has to admit it. Once he could breathe enough to speak, he took a moment to look at the huge metal doors that held back a potentially world-ending creature if allowed to escape. He sighed, wondering if he should go through with this. Sure, Bakugu was out for blood and Torchwick was still small, but he didn't want to end his whole career before it started. Did he want to take such drastic measures for his safety? Then he heard the sound of Bakugu's explosions and his anger-filled voice and decided then it was the right idea. Bakugu, who finally caught up, kneeled after exhausting his quirk to catch up. He stood up, a wicked expression of frustration on his face as he growled like an animal, "Deku." Finding his nerve for a second as he backed towards the control panel, "What do you want, Kaken? Just leave me alone." I said you have some explaining to do, you piece of shit nerd, he yelled at him. Izuku dropped his head, and Bakugo smiled at his weakness. Then Izuku brought up his head and half shouted at him, I don't owe you anything. Bakugo furrowed his brow, grit his teeth, breath in a ragged breath, and yelled out a war carry before racing towards him. Izuku did hesitate when he saw this and slammed the emergency open button and the gates slide open in seconds. Izuku waited for the young dragon to come barreling out, but stopped for a moment when found himself feeling cold. Just before he could question this, Bakugo was upon him and had jumped into the air to come down on him. Izuku almost freaked out, but the attacking blonde was swept away by a pair of tusks that slammed into him so hard he fell to the opposite wall. Izuku was confused since he didn't see what hit him at first, then he heard the trumpeting sound of Gammoth as she walked out of her enclosure and stood between the two teens. Izuku was shocked and confused, but happy to be safe nonetheless. However, Bakugo stood up, nearly having the wind knocked out of him and wondering what in the world hit him. But before he could see it, it hit him once again. And by that, Gammoth grabbed him by the keg and slammed him onto the ground a few times before throwing his unconscious form. Gammoth looked ready to finish him off as she charged at him, but Izuku jumped in front of her. Nogamod no. Stop, he commanded the animal with arms raised out, making the creature stop its attack. Once she was fully stopped, Izuku breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. Gammoth placed her trunk all over his face to make sure he was unharmed. He stroked her trunk and looked back at the info boy while grimacing. We are so sorry for what has happened. Truly, Nizu exclaimed while bowing on the floor with the other heroes as all three of them attempted to make Bakugo now, all before a very angry-looking Egon. Next to him in a smaller seat was Izuku, who was trying to look away from them, while Egon looked down on them with a repressed expression of rage. The result of all the drama was 2 destroyed doors, damaged walls, a wrecked office, and a battered-up Bakugo. Egon drummed his fingers on the desk as he asked, "Oh, and just what exactly are you sorry for, The destruction of my property, or the harassment and attempted assault of my employee who just so happens to be the vice president of NIP? All of it. We're sorry for all of it," President Mike told him. "No, I'm not," Bakugo yelled while ripping his head up, only to have it slammed back into the floor by the 3 adults. Egon glared at the teen and told him, "Just so you know, I'm about 2 nerves away from making a police report and having your self-entitled ass arrested for what you've done. I have cameras everywhere in this facility. Do you think you'll get away with this? Then try me." "Shut up," Bakugo yelled back in defiance. "Is that all you can do? Scream, curse, and attack? You're not a person, just a wild animal. Though I shouldn't say that since it's an insult to wild animals," Egon yelled at him. "Why you dash?" Bakugo tried to defy him again, only to have his face smashed into the ground. All while Eraserhead hissed, "Bakugo, shut up. We are so sorry for his behavior," Blood Vlad apologized again. Egon then stood up, put one foot on his desk, and pointing a finger at the boy exclaimed, "I don't want to hear an apology from you. I want him to show he's remorseful for his actions and beg for my forgiveness. But so far I can't see him capable of such things." Finally, they allowed the teen to bring his head up and Eraserhead whispered to him, "Say sorry and mean it or you're going to jail." Bakugo growled as he tightened his fist, shot up to his feet, and demanded back, "I won't say shit until I get some damn answers." Egon groaned in aggravation as he sat back in his seat and rubbed his temples, and listed off, "Oh, for God's sake. A wolverine can kill an adult moose. The color of the universe is called a cosmic latte. Apples, peaches, and raspberries are all members of the..." "Not those answers. I'm talking about him. I want answers from him," he yelled while pointing at Izuku, who was trying to stay out of it. The two of them looked at one another, then Egon looked back at the irate teen and replied, "Well, since you two have a history, I can see that you would, but that's entirely up to him. After all, no one owes you a thing." All eyes were on Izuku as he looked down at the desk. He thought it over for a bit, tightened his hands and told them, "Fine, I'll hear you out. But keep it civil. One more outburst and I'm getting the elephant again." "Honestly, I think that's the better option here," Egon said vexingly. Before Bakugo could go off and do anything else, Eraserhead pulled him close and whispered, "If you mess this up, it'll be your fault. I'm warning you now, we won't help you." Bakugo, surprisingly, calmed down as he sat on his chair by the desk with his anger under control. Once everyone else was seated and things were as calm as they could be, Bakugo asked in an aggressive tone, "How the fuck did you get this position at this job?" "Yeah, I'm a bit curious about that myself. Why is a 16-year-old working for a 30-year-old adult and as a vice president? Present Mike interjected while narrowing his eyes and leaning right into Egon's face. Egon twisted the man's nose hard, making him back up, and Blood Vlad asked seriously, is this even legal? Egon sighs and assures them, yes, it is legal. Izuku has every possible credential he could need to work for me legally. On that note, he's the main reason this place could even be made at all. I might run things, but he's the real brains. We're gonna need to see some proof of those credentials. Eraserhead stated. Egon sighs and makes a hand motion to Izuku. The teen leaves the room, comes back a few minutes later, and sets a framed degree before them. All the adults look down and their eyes widen in shock. Wow! An honorary degree, Present Mike exclaimed. It's legitimate if you weren't sure, Egon told them with a smile. Bakugu was the most surprised of all of them as the wheels began turning in his head. Once he finally figured out what he was questioning, he looked at Izuku and asked, is that what you were doing all along? Izuku looked away and refused to elaborate, feeling as though he didn't deserve confirmation from him. Except for Egon, who stated, that's right, bucko. In your last several months of school, while you were stomping around acting like the big man you think you are, Izuku was working his ass off to get certified and work with me to get this place off the ground. And all right under all your noses, he told him while bopping his nose. You little dash, Bakugu began to raise his voice. Bakugu, Eraserhead loudly warned him, causing Bakugu to clam up. Seriously kid, what's your deal anyway? Sure, he managed to accomplish all this under your nose in such a short time. But why is that such a problem for you? Present Mike asked the angry teen. Because someone like him shouldn't be able to accomplish this. Ever. Especially with what he has or rather doesn't have, Bakugu finally exploded while pointing a convicting finger at the green teen. Egon raised an eyebrow and asked, you really are an angry little shit, aren't you? Nothing in life will ever make you happy. You'll just be bitter till the end, to which Bakugu growled at him. Are you talking about his quirk? Is that what this whole thing is about? Present Mike asked aloud, trying to figure out the reason, and upon seeing the teen's strange expression at his guess, he asked him, don't tell me you're under the notion that a quirk should match the job they do. I mean, what's wrong with it? Is it something useless like, oh I don't know, a crystal creation quirk? At that moment, Egon, who was holding his coffee mug, broke it into several fragments as crystals began to grow out from his palm. Seeing this, Present Mike turned down his insensitive joke and said in a small shameful voice, oh, sorry. Earning him a cold-eyed glare from Egon's strange eyes. Mike. Go stand in the corner, Eraserhead told him, making the man stand up and walk face first into the nearest corner of the room. Egon sighed to replace himself and told them, that was my favorite mug. We'll pay for a new one to replace it, Nizu offered. It's the last thing made by my late mother, Egon replied in an unamused tone. Oh, then we really can't, Nizu stated while trying to hide the nerves in his voice. Mike, stand harder, Eraserhead shouted as the DJ hero pushed himself harder into the corner. Blood Vlad sighs and asks Bakugu, getting back on track. You think he can't do and accomplish all that you see because of his quirk? I don't think so. I know. And it's not because of his quirk. It's because he doesn't have one. He's a quirkless loser, Bakugu exposed with a proud shit-eating smile to all of them, making all the adults turn their heads to stare at Izuku. The teen turned his gaze away, feeling embarrassed and making the blonde teen smile at seeing his old weakness. Only for the adults to feel a sense of dread as they saw the repressed anger of Egon, who was drumming his fingers on his crossed arms. The adults forced Bakugu to sit back down and turn their eyes from the green teen. Some hero you're training here, Egon told them in a displeased hum. He then turned his ire to Bakugu and asked, and what exactly does his quirklessness have to do with anything, You realize that quirks are more recent in human history than you think, and people without them created the modern world that you take for granted. He groaned in anger as he rubberized head pain and Ted at him while stating, people like you are the whole reason that we as a species haven't evolved past violent monkeys. But Bakugu wasn't paying attention to him. Instead, he was staring directly at Izuku, who was still looking away. Their eyes met for a moment, but Izuku looked away with a sour expression which caused Bakugu to explode once more and yell, I knew all this time you were looking down on me. Weren't you? Admit it, you fucking dash. Bakugu, Eraserhead tried to stop him. Egon finally loses his temper and command, that's it. Mimikity, capture mode. Without a moment to spare, the large lockbox behind them opened up, shot out a long sticky tongue which wrapped around the teen, and caused him to get pulled into it before anyone could blink. The box snapped shut, licked its lid, and burped. Everyone stood in shocked silence at what they saw and didn't dare move or speak. Until Present Mike did and screamed, "What the fuck? You killed him." After getting the ringing out of his ears, Egon assured him and explained, "Calm down, he's not dead. Just imprisoned. It's no different than stuffing him in a locker. That thing was alive. It had teeth and everything." "How is he not dead?" Bloodblade exclaimed, looking ready to fight the box. "He'd only be dead if was in there for an hour," Egon told them nonchalantly. "An hour?" Mike exclaimed. "Then he'd be nothing but bones in another 3, Egon explains more. "BBB bones," Mike stammers out in fear. "If you're gonna continue to repeat everything I say, then we'll be here all day," Egon tells him, already fed up with the gag. After he goes silent, Egon sighs and commands, "Mimikity, eject." The box listens and regurgitates the blonde teen into the floor, causing it to cough a bit before returning back to normal. Bakugu lays in a heap on the floor in a shock and seemingly unresponsive state. As Blood Vlad and Eraserhead go to collect him, Egon leans towards Nizu and tells him, "Listen Nizu, I don't have the time or patience to deal with things legally, so I'm gonna make this real simple for you. Go collect yourselves, your students, that half-wit egotistical future villain you are training and gearing up to legally kill, and get the hell out of my laboratory." Nizu bows before him again and says apologetically, "We understand. Well, compensate you for the damages. Again, we are very sorry." Egon turns away to speak with Izuku as the heroes scrap up Bakugu and make their way out of the office. However, the already open automatic door slides shut in their faces. Taking a moment to wait, thinking it was on a sensor or timer, they realized it wasn't. To which Present Mike brought up and stated, Professor Egon. You've made your point, we're going." "What?" Egon asked while turning around in his seat. "You can unlock the door now," Present Mike told him as nicely as he could. Egon got up from his seat, marched up to the door, and stated irritated, "It's not dashed." When he realized the door wouldn't open, he dropped off by saying, "Locked?" He then tried several methods of getting it open, but when it didn't, he had to use the manual security code to get it open, where it finally did. Scratching his head, he said confused, "I didn't do this." But before they could question why this happened, red lights filled the room with a loud siren striking their ears. "Warning! Warning! Warning!" sounded off a pre-recorded voice over the speaker system. "What's that?" Blood Vlad asked over the loud siren. "The security system. Something has set it off," Egon shouted as well while entering the manual alarm shutdown code. Once the alarm stopped blaring loud enough to split your skull, Egon took the mic for the PA system and announced, "Attention everyone, please calmly make your way to the auditorium, this is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." After a few minutes, everyone in the lab had made their way into the huge and empty auditorium, with the pro-heroes and slimy Bakugu, who were talking very loudly over one another in a full-blown panic. The pro-heroes and the staff of the lab were trying to get the young heroes under control, but that only seemed to make the panic even worse until the echoes caused it to make the empty place even louder than before. At this point, Egon jumped into the stage with Izuku to attempt to grab their attention. "Everyone! Everyone! Everyone!" He tried to shout over them only to get tired of this and yelled as loud as he could, "Quiet!" When that didn't work, a gunshot rang through the area, causing everyone to shut up and duck their heads for cover. When they looked up, they saw Hatsum holding shotgun into the air with a hole in the roof of the auditorium. Cho yanked the gun from his hands and glared at the smiling man. Izuku was the one to speak and cleared his voice while saying, "Thank you, Hatsum." The pink-haired man smiled with giving a thumbs up. Izuku told the crowd, "Now then, I know you're all very confused as to what is happening, and trust us, we have everything under control. It was just a slight malfunction in the system, so there's no need to panic." The two owners of the laboratory were then befuddled by the sight of the crowd looking not at them, but in their direction. The two of them looked at one another, then behind them where they saw a small black hole begging to grow. The two of them backed away from it and off the stage where the pro-heroes joined them in defense. "Professor, is this part of the security system?" Eraserhead asked him. "I was gonna ask if it was from you guys," Egon prompted back. A few moments later and the black hole expands tenfold with glowing yellow eyes. Then a man covered in severed hands, greasy gray hair, red eyes, scratched up neck, and shaggy black clothes emerged from it alongside a whole arm of other weirdly dressed people and a huge monster. The monster was built like a mountain, wearing ripped pants, black skin, an exposed brain, a yellow break, and unblinking eyes. The black hole was the last to show himself as a human-like figure with a head that moved like a flame, yellow eyes, and wearing a bartender suit. The person covered in hands glared at them and said in a crackling voice, "Hello, heroes." "Villains," exclaimed one of the young heroes, making the pros step in front and ready for a fight. The hand villain, who was called Tamura by the mist villain, scratched at his neck and chuckled in a raspy tone while saying, "So good to see all of you here in one place. That sure makes our job much easier." "What do you want?" Eraserhead demanded. "And who are you?" Bloodvlad also demanded. Tamura tilted his head and told them, "Us? We're the League of Villains, and we're here for All Might." This time it was Egon to speak as he walked up a bit to expose himself and informed him, "Hey handyman, if you haven't noticed, we don't have a 7-foot-tall blonde Japanese wannabe American otaku stomping around. Why do you think he was here anyway?" According to our sources, All Might was supposed to be here today. The Mist Man, who was known as Kurgrir, answered politely. Egon rolled his eyes while waving the statement and exclaiming, "PSH. Bologna. If he was gonna be here I would have been informed." "Actually," Nizu said in a small tone. Egon snapped his neck to him and asked in a serious tone, "Are you joking?" Nizu shook his head and Egon held him up by his collar and shaking him he yelled, "You low-grade back alley science experiment. Why didn't you tell me that All Might of all people was gonna be here today?" "Would you believe me if I said it slipped my mind?" Nizu answered as he was violently shook him as the other pros tried to stop the flaming scientist. Hey! Why the anger? Are you scared that you didn't make this place pretty for his arrival?" Present Mike tried to jokingly wear off the current aura. "More like warning someone of it," Egon grumbles. "What?" Present Mike asked. "Nothing," Egon quickly says. "Hey!" Tamura shouted. All heads turned back to the confused villains and Egon states while dropping Nizu, "Oh yeah, you're still here." After adjusting himself he tells the villains, "Well listen, whatever your name is. Since All Might isn't here that means you can leave, right? I mean you went fishing for a whale and got guppies. What could you possibly gain from harming 3 pro heroes who aren't even that popular or liked?" "Hey!" Present Mike shouted. "A bunch of snot-nosed teenagers who haven't even experienced sex." "Hey!" one of the teens yelled. "And a couple of no-name scientists." "Hey!" Professor Genus yelled only to get smacked upside the head by one of Professor Cephalopod's tentacles. "Shut up, he's trying to save us," he hissed at his companion in a low tone. "More than you think," Tamura stated boldly. "Explain," Egon offered, looking intrigued. "What's he doing?" one of the kids asked. "Buying time," Izuku whispered to them. "Even if we can't kill the symbol of peace, we can still stake our names on every person in Japan. And your deaths will do just that," Tamura stated with sinister intent. Egon put on a confused expression by this statement and dissected, "But none of us are relevant. If anything you'll just be seen as a bunch of psychos and possible pedophiles. Killing the symbol of peace, now that is a way to send a message and have your name whispered with fear. Us though, really?" he asked while looking around at them. Tamura scratched his neck in thought before saying, "Can't believe I'm saying this but you might have a point." "Holy shit, it's working," Orpington whispered excitedly. "So, you'll leave?" Egon prompted Tamura, who then shook his head with a crock smile and said, "Nah," as the other villains started to close in with sinister smiles. Egon sighed at this and said, "Welp, I tried. Security. Active command override, indicate all kill modes. 00001000 kill initiate." The villain stopped and looked around for whatever was supposed to happen, but when nothing did, Tamura chuckled dryly and said, "We've knocked out your security system before coming here. You're trapped." "Shoot," Egon said in a calm tone. Then the floor opened up all around the crowd and Egon shouted, Whoa, what the hell?" "Divide and conquer," was the last thing Egon heard the villain say before all down into darkness. Egon was grabbed by the sensation of falling, overtaking his body and senses, but the sensation quickly stopped as soon as it came when he landed on his butt a moment later. After shaking his head and rubbing it he said to himself, "Well, that was unusual. Kinda felt like swimming in the air." The voice of Izuku chimed in. Egon whipped his head and exclaimed, "Izuku." Izuku smiled wide at seeing him, exclaiming, "Egon." The two embraced each other as Egon stated in a relieved voice, "Oh, I'm so glad you're all right." "Ahem. We're here too," a voice said to the two of them. Jumping to their feet and whirling themselves in the direction of the perceived danger, they relaxed when there wasn't any danger at all. "Oh, Nizu and you," Egon stated while pointing to the principal and Bakugu. Egon then quickly looked around and asked, "Wait, Where's the other three? Everyone looks around as well, but no sign of Eraserhead, Blood Vlad, or Present Mike anywhere. The nerves settled in again as some of them assumed the worst, which was also confirmed by Nizu. They must still be back at the auditorium, he thought aloud. Where are we? Bakugo asked, looking around the room. Back in my office, Egon trailed off while finally realizing where they were. Then a thought shot through his head and he exclaimed, hold on. Where'd everyone else go? Egon immediately ripped out his phone and dialed a group call. Putting it in the speaker he called, attention tension. Roll call. Very quickly everyone picked up and answered back with a here, to which Egon and Izuku sigh in relief. Oh, thank the gods. Where is everyone? Egon asks, trying to hide his fearful desperation. I'm back in my wing with Professor Cephalopod, Genus replied. I'm back in mine too, Hollyhock confirmed. Mine too, said Hankio. Me too, Hatsum called. Me three, Honey Lemon said in a shaken tone. I'm here in my wing with Dr. Orpington, Cho told him. We're safe as well. We got transported to the storage house with several students, the Morgana triplets told him in unison. That nitwit villain sent us to our respective areas, Cluck laughed. Which means we have an advantage, Otto exclaimed while slapping his tentacles. At least we know that the students are all safe, Nizu sighs in relief. Egon nods, grateful that the kids were safe and accounted for. He then took a more serious time and said, okay, listen up everyone. We're in a dire time with the security against us and the doors locked down. I'm officially initiating all-kill protocol. Defend yourself by whatever means necessary. Yes sir, everyone already back. Sir, so inquiret. Yes Cho, Egon replied. As it turns out, the security system isn't down, she told him, making everyone listening raise their eyebrows in shock. I think those clowns had tried to hack us, but it was around the time I was doing a diagnostic. We're still in control. Just have to wait, she explained, the smile on her face being felt through her words. Egon fist-pumped and exclaimed, sweet. But we're still locked in, she followed up. He deflated and asked, not sweet. How long before the diagnosis finishes? After a few seconds of silence and typing from Cho, and she answered affirmatively, 5 minutes. Everyone, hold out for 5 minutes, Egon commands. Yes sir, they all answer back as he disconnects the line. Egon and Izuku then opened a hidden panel in the room. From there they both entered individual codes for scanning their eyes and fingerprints. Nizu and Bakugo looked on in confusion of what they were doing, wondering what else was hidden in the walls. So what are we gonna do? Bakugo asked calmly, more confused by the two scientists. Try and get out or help the heroes, Izuku answered as he spoke through the voice recognizer. How are we gonna do that? Nizu prompted them. The two of them then took out keys from their sleeves, plugged them in, looked at one another and nodded. They both turned the keys at the same time, causing green lights to flash and something else to open up in the wall. Egon reached in and took out two objects that looked like collars and Izuku took out a small rack holding several splinters. Egon put on his before putting Izuku's on as the teen hooked on several splinters all around the collars, making the mouse and blonde teen look at one another in confusion. Even Nizu shrugged when Bakugo asked with his expression. Once secured, Egon answers, something that was also put in your waiver. Creature division. Just before the teens could buckle down for help to arrive, a black portal opened out, came several dozen villains into the science wing and began to surround the young heroes and the two scientists. All of them smiling sinisterly like hungry lions cornering an injured gazelle. Nowhere to run now, little heroes, one of the villains vexed. Otto, what do we do? We're trapped and have no way of defending ourselves, Genus panicked. I have an idea. Just let me cook, Otto whispered to him with a wink before putting on the theatrics, exclaiming like an old movie star, oh you're right Mr. Villain. We're so trapped and weak and at your mercy. But can you at least let an old octopus have one last request? The villain chuffed and asked back, what is it? How is that octopus talking? Another villain pointed out. Can I dry my eyes and blow my nose one last time? Otto asked, putting waterworks and blinking his big eyes. If that's all then sure, go right ahead, the villain agreed as Otto reached out for a box of tissues. Then the villain put a thinking face on and realized aloud, wait a second. Octopuses don't have noses. Suddenly the villain was hit in the face hard by a tentacle. The blow was so hard and decisive that the villain was sent flying back to the wall where they passed out. And neither do you, sucker, Otto exclaimed as he retracted his extended limb. How'd he do that? One of the other villains asked in awe. Like this, Otto exclaimed while punching him in the face and found the same thing as the first one. But then more tentacles began to grow from his body and started to sock the villains with a flurry of blows. The villains began to grow panicked and some tried to run away in the chaos. However, one villain stood firm and reignited their dispositions as they exclaimed, "Calm down you guys, it's just one fish with a bunch of legs. It's not like he's gigantic or something." The villain trailed off as he watched the small octopus transform into a literal behemoth. "You were saying," Otto asked him before he let out a roar and started to grab up villains and crush them in his powerful grip. Unbeknownst to any of them, the professor had 4 splinters wrapped around one tentacle behind himself. A splinter that allows for the stretching of limbs, a splinter that allows for the growth of additional limbs, a splinter that gives gigantification, and a splinter that gives a form of hyper-regeneration. As the huge octopus monster took on the villains with seeming ease, the young heroes looked on in the mix of shock, awe, and horror. "Could he always do that?" one of them asked the other professor. To which he casually shook his head and answered, "No. Plant division." "End of the line, green thumbs," a villain exclaimed in a devilish tone as they cornered the kids and female scientist like hungry lions cornering a gazelle. Hollyhock glared at them and stated, "That's what I should be saying to you all." She then thrusted hands and every plant in the greenhouses started to move before quickly attacking all of them. Vines grabbed and strangled, buds and pods spat spores, poison needles, and goop, plants that had teeth and began to snap them up, plants that hypnotized, and plants that shot elements and explosions. The villains screamed in shock and fright as Hollyhock concentrated on keeping them back. "What the hell? The plants are alive," one villain screamed before getting caught in vines and being shoved into the toothy maw of a carnivorous plant. Sound division. "Ungoliant? Ungoliant. Where are you?" Hankyo exclaimed as he practically his office inside out with a place precession only for him to instantly relax as he stated while hunched over in a corner, "Oh, there you are. I was so worried." "Who's Ungoliant? You sister, girlfriend, daughter?" a student asked as the man turned around with cupped hands to happily and proudly reveal a spider no bigger than the head of a pin. To which the students freaked out and tried to swat at it while yelling, "Ah! Spider!" Before the students could swat at the tiny thing, one Hankyo's head tubs whipped out and bit him on the nose. Hankyo turned away, protecting the spider and exclaimed, "Don't hurt her. She's just a jumping spider. She's harmless to humans, and helps keep me sane," he said the last bit with a slight unhinged expression. Another student, who saw this, trailed off uncomfortably. "You stay in your terrarium where it's safe. I love you," he told the little spider while placing it inside an environment that was far too big for it while giving her a little kiss before closing it. He then turned back to the kids and stated seriously, "Okay kids, now stay behind me. No matter what happens, you need to stay safe and dashed." Before he could finish, one of the doors was busted in and dozens of villains poured in while one of them said, "Trapped like rats." Hankyo stood in front of the teens, arms spread to protect them. He then stood before them with his chest out and declared, "Okay, listen up you villains. You can turn tail and leave or stay and suffer." All the villains began to laugh at his declaration, and one of them asked vexingly, "Ha! And what are you gonna do?" Hankyo sighs as he closes his eyes and reaches into his pocket, taking out a splinter as he says, "I don't like using my quirk since it reminds me of my past. But you freaks have left me with no choice." One of his head tubes, the one that looked like a tail, curled over to his head where it split open at the tip onto something that looked like a microphone from the early 1920s. He breathed deep as his other head tubes moved to the top of his head and opened their mouths. Hankyo then produced a high note with such hypersonic power behind it that not only did it send the villains away in a shock wave, it also caused their ears and organ to burst while their skin was pulled off their bodies, leaving them bloody messes along the wall. Hankyo gasped and coughed hard, falling to his knees as the teens, now releasing their ears, surrounded him in worry. "I didn't know your quirk could do that," one of them said. "It can't," Hankyo told them while wiping his mouth. "Robotics and machine division." "Any last words, String Bean?" a female villain asked rhetorically as she and a bunch of other villains cornered Hatsum and several students. The pink-haired man fixed his goggles and stated with a smile, "Yes actually." "Could you hold off your attack for another 30 seconds? The female villain raised an eyebrow and asked back, 30 seconds? What's happening in 30 seconds? "Oh, just the update I've done on the robots," Hatsum told her with a knowing wiggle of his finger. "Robots?" she questions, wondering what he was talking about. Then a loud ding noise sounded off in the room they were in, like that of a toaster, and Hatsum excitedly shook his hands while exclaiming, "Oh, they're done. Wait right there. He then ran off and pressed a button on a wall near a strange door. It opened up to reveal darkness, and within red eyes glowed one but one. Within a few seconds a horde of robots came out in 2 single file lines with arms raised out in a threatening display. "What the hell?" the female villain shouted as they all came filing out like a tidal wave. "Robots! Commence Operation Swarm! Go go go!" Hatsum commanded. The robots turned their unmoving cold emotionlessly and began to march towards the intruders with murderous intent. Very quickly the villains found themselves with the shoe on the other end of the foot. "Crap, there's so many," one villain shouted before getting swarmed and torn limb from limb. The female villain was doing better as she manages to take down robots by the handful. Realizing something she exclaimed, "But they're so weak. We can take 'em." Hatsum sighs at her comment and stated back while rocking on his heels, "You know I wasn't gonna bring it out yet, since it was only 50% completed. But since you think you can take out my army, I guess I'll just do it anyway. It needs a field run." He then ran through the same doorway the robots came flooding out of, and a large garage door next to it quickly opened up to reveal Hatsum standing much taller and making a lot of unnatural sounds. When he came out he was sitting inside of a giant clunky suit that looked like something from Mad Max. As the hulking behemoth of iron stepped out, the villains lost their edge. "He has a MEK," one of them yelled as a giant fist of iron came down on them. "Chemical division. Go away. 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 Go away," Honey Lemon screamed as she blasted the onslaught of villains with a giant ray gun machine that shot out a stream of green acidic liquid, leaving a trail of death and screaming as villains began to melt to nothing. "Defense and Armaments Division. We need backup. Call the boss," a villain screamed as they ducked for cover with another villain that was trying to fiddle with a radio. I'm trying," the other villain yelled back in a panic, just before his head was blown off his shoulders. The first villain screamed but stated himself and grabbed the radio as more gunshots were heard overhead and the sounds of people falling dead. After fiddling with it for a bit, he finally got a connection as he watched a brave soul attempt to run headlong into the fray only to be gunned down a few seconds later. "Boss. Are you there? Say something," the villain yelled through the speaker. "What is it?" Tamura's scraggly voice answered on the other end. "We need help," he begged. Sounding annoyed he shot back, "It's just one-eyed woman and some brats. They can't be that hard." Shaking his head he explained, "It's not the kids, it's her. She's dropping us left and right. You said this would be easy. She's quirkless." "How are you having trouble?" Tamura yelled loud enough for all to hear. But the villain's head was blown off right at the time when Cho yelled the answer, "I have a shotgun. And I have an egg cannon. Say goodbye to your necks." Cluck laughed as she used her machine to hold and fire her invention. The two of them work in tandem to quickly shift the tide of battle in their favor, with all the villains cowering at a single woman and chicken armed with nothing but firearms. "Storehouse. What the hell is this shit made of? Open up this force field right now," a villain demanded as they pounded on a force field made by the Morgana triplets. "And let you in?" Morgan asked rhetorically. "Fat chance," Millicent scoffed. "How about this instead?" Megan offered as a piece of the force field broke apart and slammed into the villain in the form of a tendril of darkness, sending him slamming to the wall and knocking him unconscious. Another villain growled and proclaimed, "You can't hold this wall forever. You'll drop it or we'll break it." "We don't have to hold it forever," Morgan started. "Just have to buy time," Megan continues. "Then you see the surprise we have," Millicent finishes with a wry smile. Auditorium. Tamura nearly broke the radio he was holding in his hands, resisting the urge to use all 5 of his fingers. He was trying to get in contact with his last few groups after the last one went dead, only for his irrigation to grow as he got almost nothing back. Throwing the device on the ground as a battle raged on behind him he yelled, "What the fuck is going on? Is everything alright, young master?" Kurgreer asked him. "I have no fucking idea. I can't get in contact with any of our teams, and the ones I can are either static or just screaming." "How in the hell are we getting creamed?" Tamura asked after realizing what happened to the others. Kurgreer pats his shoulder comfortingly and tells him, not to worry. "Even if we lose all of our help, we only need Nomu. And the heroes won't last much longer." As he says this, they both look out into the large room where the 3 heroes were fighting against the hulking Nomu and not doing so well against it. Things were looking good for the scientist but not for much longer. "No," Izuku rejected and pulled away, much to Bakugo's surprise. "First off, they're called splinters, second they're our property, third, they're hard to make, and finally, I don't trust you, Izuku firmly told him off. Bakugo was hit into another stunned silence for the second time by Izuku, and just like the last one, he had no idea how to react to it. So he just stood there stuff with his mouth open. While this went down, Nizu turned his eyes to the security monitor and stated, "I see they even took out the cameras. I hope your staff is doing okay." This statement sent a shiver up the professor's spine as he realized he hadn't checked in on them and whipped out his phone to do a group call. Once on speaker, he announced, "Attention, tension. Is everyone okay?" "Not really. Otto is on his last leg, arm," Genus told him with a nervous tone. "I'm running out of plants to fight," Hollyhock shouted. "I'm losing my voice," Hankyo squeaked out. "I'm out of robots and my MEK has shut down," Hatsum stated with a displeased neutral tone. "I'm all out of juice," Honey Lemon screamed. "I'm out of ammo but I won't stop fighting," Cho exclaimed before she started to shout a war cry and run. "Our force field is almost done for," the triplets told him with feverish fear. As Egon and Izuku heard this, all hope seemed to vanish. The sound of fighting and their workers struggling to hold on sent chills down their backs. They couldn't do anything at this point, it was hopeless. They were trapped in their facility with no contact and overrun by criminals with a monster that could do who knows what. On top of that, they had a bunch of kids to try and protect. What could they do? In the moment of conflict, emotions, and thoughts, all Izuku could do was fall to his knees and cry. Egon wasn't much better as his knees locked together and he covered his mouth in shock and tears flowed like two rivers down his face. Was this the end? And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer. See you in the next video?